What's up, internet people? Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be giving a quick presentation on triplicity rulership. So, if you aren't familiar with traditional astrology, then that whole term triplicity rulership may sound very foreign to you. But all triplicity means is element. Triplicity is another word for element. And so everybody in astrology is familiar with the elements fire, earth, air, and water. And what happens is that there are three planets that rule over each of the elements. And that was a very important thing in medieval astrology for reasons I'll get to later in this presentation. But I just want to say that don't let if you're not familiar with the term triplicity rulership, don't let it intimidate you because you could just replace triplicity and say element rulership. If you're unfamiliar with triplicity rulership, but even if you are, this is going to be the primary table that we're going to be using in order to understand the rulership. It's very straightforward, but this table right here refers to triplicity. And the main thing I want to say out the gate is that it does matter what time, not what time you were born, but whether you have a day chart or a night chart. Because if you're born during, let me see. I just want to make sure I'm recording because I was talking and okay, I'm recording. But if you're born during the day, then your sun is going to be above the horizon in your chart. And if you are born at night, the sun is going to be below the horizon. But that matters because there is something known as a daytime ruler and a nighttime ruler. And what that means is that for each element, let's start with the fire element. For Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, and yeah, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, those are going to be those are going to be the signs that fall under the fire element. And so the daytime ruler for the fire element would be the sun. So no matter where you see Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius in a chart, the daytime triplicity ruler or the first triplicity ruler for the element is going to be the sun. The second triplicity ruler would be Jupiter, and the third or cooperating triplicity ruler is going to be Saturn. Saturn is always going to be the third ruler with the fire element. But what happens is if you were born at night, then Sun and Jupiter are going to be switched. And Jupiter is going to be the first triplicity ruler, and the Sun is going to be the second triplicity ruler. And I know it may seem somewhat random when it comes to the assignment of these planets over the fire element, because you may be like, hey, well, shouldn't Mars, the fire planet, be a triplicity ruler? Well, the rationale behind that is that fire and air are the masculine diurnal elements, while Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn are the masculine and diurnal planets. Therefore, they rule over a masculine diurnal element or the masculine diurnal elements such as fire and air. And then the more receptive or the feminine elements such as water and earth, those are going to be ruled by feminine and nocturnal planets such as Venus, Mars, and the moon. Now, I want to go to Gemini because Gemini is also going to be a masculine element. And Gemini, the daytime triplicity ruler for Gemini is going to be Saturn. And the nighttime triplicity ruler for the air element is going to be Mercury. And then the cooperating ruler is always going to be Jupiter. So you may again wonder, why is Saturn associated with the, air element? Well, Saturn has a lot to do with the air element. Saturn rules over the air sign Aquarius, and Saturn has exalted rulership in the air sign Libra. And again, Saturn is a masculine diurnal planet, so it only makes sense that he has rulership over a masculine diurnal element, especially in an element that he has two ruling signs in. And then Mercury is the nighttime ruler. So what that basically means is that, Mercury rules over, because I know I mentioned earlier that, you know, masculine, feminine, but Mercury is said to be neutral. But Mercury represents communication, information, and travel. And he's very swift in his motion. And so that is his association with the air element. And Mercury rules the air sign Gemini. And then Jupiter we have as a cooperating triplicity ruler because Jupiter is a diurnal planet. And so basically what that means is that despite any other type of rulership in the chart, if you were to find Jupiter in an air sign like Aquarius, Libra, or Gemini, even though Gemini is a challenging sign for him, there is something that Jupiter has to work with. That is a position that's going to be somewhere like, you know, mitigated because Jupiter and Libra, while that's not Jupiter's domicile or exaltation, Jupiter has triplicity there. And if Jupiter has triplicity there, especially if it's in his first phase, that can show what Jupiter can be very powerful within that sign. So triplicity rulership is just one way to measure how strong a planet is or how well a planet can function. And then for the remaining elements, water and earth, with Cancer, so for Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, the daytime ruler is always going to be Venus, and the nighttime ruler is going to be Mars, and the cooperating ruler is going to always be the moon. So if you're born at night, no matter where you see the sign Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, it would be advantageous to investigate the placement of Mars because he's the nighttime ruler of the water element. And and if it's during the day, Venus. And the moon, again, is always going to be the cooperating ruler. She's always going to be um the third triplicity ruler of the water element. And then finally, we have the earth element, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And so these signs here, the first triplicity ruler for Taurus, I mean, for the earth element is going to be Venus. The second triplicity ruler is going to be the moon, and the cooperating ruler is always going to be Mars. Again, if you're born during the day, I mean, I'm sorry, if you're born at night, then the first triplicity ruler is going to be the moon. The second triplicity ruler is going to be Venus. And once again, the cooperating ruler is going to be Mars. So I highly recommend that you like find one of these dignity tables. You could just Google table of planetary rulership, triplicity rulership, essential dignities. This one here is a PDF file that Chris Brennan has made available on his website, HellenisticaStrology.com. And if you have trouble like finding one, or if you want me to send you this one, I can just shoot you an email and send you this one if you just shoot me an email in my description box below. But they are relatively easy to find online because it's going to be because it can be challenging to remember, especially because it's not the most intuitive. Like you really have to, like for me personally, it's easy for me to remember the fire and the air element rulers, but I always kind of my brain always switches the water and the earth rulers, and so I have to work on that. But the reason why triplicity rulership is so important because it allows astrologers to become very specific in our delineation of things. And so, as you all know, the 12 houses, they cover a broad range of topics. Like there are so many things that you can say about the fourth house. You know, it rules the father, it rules the family, it also rules land and agriculture, it also rules, the end of your life. The same can be said about the seventh house. In addition to ruling your romantic partners, it also rules your business partners, and it can show your adversaries and your opponents. Even with the 10th house rules the mother, but it also can rule the career and your reputation and your status in the world. And so triplicity rulers allow us to gain very specific information about specific topics in a chart. So for the first house, it's going to be more so based on time. So the triplicity rulers of your first house is not going to be representing different topics, rather they're going to be representing different stages in your life. So for the first part of life, which is going to be up until age 28, this particular planet, the first duplicity ruler is going to represent your quality, temperament, desires, and conditions. And then from age 29 to maybe like 57, the second triplicity ruler is going to represent the quality of your life, temperament, desires, and conditions. And then for your elderly or the final part of your life, that's going to be represented by the third triplicity ruler. And so what that can mean is that a Saturn in Aries in the third house is going to be very different than a Mercury in Virgo because Saturn is afflicted, right? By being in Aries and by being cadent. But Mercury, if he's the second triplicity ruler of the native life, then I could look at a person and say, based on this and some other things I have to look at, the second part of your life should be more beneficial than the first part of your life. During this part of your life, because Mercury is in Virgo, you may acquire a skill set. You may become involved in some sort of business, some sort of thing where you have to be very technical and be very precise. You may become very devoted and dutiful to a particular craft, and that should provide you with the skills that's going to be necessary to live a more improved life versus with the Saturn in Aries, that tells a very different story. Again, I think I gave the third house as an example. One thing off the top of my head I could think about is there could have been some sort of issue with, a sibling or with short distance travel during the early part of their life. There could have been a very difficult early upbringing, and that could have really stuck with the person. And then, around age 28, things could change for them. And then with that being so, and that would be true for any of the air signs on the ascendant. So if you have Gemini, Aquarius, or Libra rising in a day chart, then Saturn is going to be the first triplicity ruler. Mercury is going to be representing the second part of your life, and then Jupiter is going to be representing the third part of your life. Same for fire. Like for instance, I'm a fire rising, and so I'm born at night. So Jupiter has the first part of my life. I have Jupiter in Aquarius in the seventh house. And then the sun is going to represent the second part of my life. And then the third part of my life is going to be represented by Saturn, which is gonna be a little crazy because my Saturn ain't the most, it's not the most stable. Um, but my Jupiter, has triplicity rulership in Aquarius and it has angularity in the seventh. And so that certainly suggests some amount of interest in astrology and Jupiterian things such as philosophy, the arts, long distance travel, higher education, with Aquarius representing organized thought, that's representing my interest in astrology and connecting with other people with that astrology during this part of my life because Jupiter's in the seventh house. And then the second house is all about money, 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 money. There are other meanings, but again, this is going to be time-based and it's going to be representing your money and livelihood for the first part of your life, the second part of your life, and the third part of your life. So if you have Cancer on the second and you are born at during the day, then what that can show is that Venus, um, Venus is going to be the first triplicity ruler. It's going to represent your money during the first part of your life. Then Mars is going to be the second, and then the moon is going to be the third. And so let's say you have Venus, Jupiter. Well, that's really good. And let's say that they are free from the rage of malefics and they're well supported. That may show riches and where money is abundant, and you may even be spoiled a little bit. And then let's say we get to Mars for the same example, and your Mars is in, let's say Mars is in Gemini and in opposition with Neptune. That's going to be a bit more challenging. There's going to be a drastic change, and that can show maybe, the loss of assets or having to liquidate your assets, or that can even show where there could be potential theft involving your money and livelihood, or you may earn your money through dealing with Mars and Neptune things. And a Mars Neptune combination could, deal with working with sick people, working in a hospital, or working with those that may be dealing with some sort of infection. Mars Neptune also has connections with water for work. And then the third ruler, which would be representing the end of your life, and that example would be the moon. And so let's say the moon is in Taurus. Well, the delineation for that, very brief delineation would be money should be really good during the first part of the life. Around age 28 to 57, 59, there should be some challenges. And then things should stabilize during the third part of life. And you will see some people are very blessed and they'll have like each of the rulers well supported. And then the third house, the triplicity rulers for this house is going to be mainly involving separating your siblings. So the third house is the house of siblings, it's the house of brothers. And so that's broad because you may have a lot of siblings. You may have three. Let's just say, for the sake of this video, let's just say you have three siblings. The first triplicity ruler is going to be representing your younger sibling. Your middle sibling is going to be the second triplicity ruler, and the oldest sibling is going to be the third triplicity ruler. I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure how to delineate more than three siblings using this method. I have my own method for looking at siblings in the natal chart, which deals with derived houses, but I also use this. But if there are more than three siblings, then I'll just go to the derived houses, which is where the third house is the first sibling, and then the fifth house would be the second sibling, and then three, four, five, six, seventh house would be the third sibling, the ninth house would be the fourth sibling, the 11th house would be the fifth sibling, and all of that. So that's how I would do it if it were more than three siblings. But you may have one sibling that's a musician. Let's say that's Mercury, Venus. May have one sibling that's um a that was in the military, but that could be a Mars Pluto or Mars Saturn. And then your oldest sibling, they may have never worked and married rich, and that could be maybe a Venus Neptune, a Venus Jupiter. And then the fourth house. And so here, once we get to this house, we begin to specifically designate certain topics to certain planets. And so the first triplicity ruler is going to represent your father specifically. The second triplicity ruler is going to represent lands, fields, real estate, buried treasure. And then the third triplicity ruler is going to represent the final outcomes, endings, prisons, and the final part of life. And this is, again, as you can see, is very important because it allows us to designate specific topics because the fourth house in and of itself carries all of these meanings within it. And so when you come to the fourth house, how do you know how to separate the father from real estate? Well, this is one way that you're able to do that. And it's one way that allows you to be able to gain even more information because what you can do is if you got Scorpio, let's say it's a night chart and you got Scorpio on the fourth house cusp, well, the planet that rules the fourth house is going to represent the father, but so is the triplicity ruler, the first triplicity ruler of that house, which in this case is still going to be Mars. So you should be paying a lot of attention to Mars and whatever Mars is doing in the chart, that's going to be reflective of the father's role and how the father was as a person. And let's say you wanted to investigate what the end part of your life will look like, you may be setting up retirement and you may want to be considering, hey, will I be living in a foreign country in another during the end part of my life? What will I be doing? Then you'll look at the third triplicity ruler, which in this case would be the moon. And so let's say you saw the moon in the ninth house. Well, that would be a suggestion that you may be living far away from home during the final parts of your life. Or you could take on a strong interest in some sort of divination, such as astrology or tarot, or even anything else that represents like God and the universe, such as religion and theology. And so the first triplicity ruler for the fifth house represents children and pregnancy. The second triplicity ruler represents pleasure, vices, and love affairs. And the third triplicity ruler represents messengers, presents, and gifts. Again, just to elaborate, the fifth house carries within it all of these topics. And so if you want to specifically look at children and pregnancy, then you should be investigating the first triplicity ruler of the fifth house. And then the sixth house, everybody's favorite house, right? This is the house of illness, recovery, and it represents servants, people that work underneath you, but also servitude. And the first triplicity ruler is going to be representing illness and recovery from illness, as well as infirmities and defects. The second triplicity ruler is going to represent slaves, servants, and people that work under you. And the third triplicity ruler would be the activity and the benefit from servants and employees, but it's also going to represent your domestic animals. And so basically, what it's saying is that when we go to the sixth house and we want to look at the illness within your life, well, we know we got to go to the sixth house. And based on this, we'll be looking at the first triplicity ruler for illness. Now, if I wanted to inquire or gain information about your beloved cat, then I would also go to the sixth house, but instead I will look at the third triplicity ruler. I think that's real dope. And I'm going to start incorporating this more in my videos that I upload here on YouTube. And then the seventh house represents the spouse. It represents legal litigation situations, open enemies, and your business associates. The first triplicity ruler is going to represent your spouse and your intimate partner. The second triplicity ruler is going to represent controversies, open enemies, and thieves. And that's because the seventh house is in opposition from the first. And so it represents somebody taking something away from you or opposing you. And then the third triplicity rule is going to represent formal and legal documents, social intercourse, and business associates. And so when someone comes to me and asking me about their love life, well, I have a rubric. I'm going to look at their Venus placement. I'm going to look at the seventh house and the planet that rules it. And I'll also be looking at the first triplicity ruler of the seventh house to gain more insight about the specific partner or future partner. I'll look at the part of marriage and its ruler, and I'll even look at the lot of arrows. Now, if somebody is coming to me and they're wanting to know if they should go in business with a particular person, and I catch the horary chart, well, I'm going to look to the seventh house, obviously, but I'm going to pay special attention to the third triplicity ruler, as that is the ruler that has specific designation over the person's business partner and the people that they're going to be doing business with. And if I see that the third triplicity ruler of the seventh is in fall or detriment, cadent, retrograde, in the 12th, in the 8th, I'll say, no, don't do it. And then the 8th house. So this is a very broad house as well because, well, I don't want to say broad, but it's very polarizing because on one hand, it represents your partner's resources. And then on the other hand, it represents death. And I know those things can be difficult to, bring together, but um, it rules death because it is in aversion to the ascendant. So it doesn't form a Ptolemaic aspect with the ascendant. So it is said to be a house of darkness and not supportive to life. It is the house of your partner's money because it is the second from the seventh. So the first triplicity rule is going to represent death, fear, and anguish. The second triplicity rule is going to represent old or ancient things. And the third triplicity rule is going to be representing inheritances and legacies from the dead. Let me see. Yeah, and legacies from the dead. I was trying to see if there was one that was specifically for the partner's money, but I would add to this, look to the ruler of the eighth house as the primary significator for your partner's money, and look to the first triplicity ruler of the eighth house for the part of the eighth house that has to represent death, as well as planets in that house as having to represent those more malevolent topics of the eighth house. That's how I separate it. And you know, if you want to investigate your eighth house to see, hey, will I receive any sort of inheritance? Then the third triplicity ruler of this house will be what you will be looking at, and you'll be looking at that planet, and you'll be, let's say it's the moon, and you see the moon is in a relationship with Jupiter and or even Venus or even Saturn, and let's say there's some dignity involved with that, that may be a sign that you may be receiving an inheritance. But you have to look at it much more nuanced. But it's all about looking at how well a planet is supported and what that planet is doing, because Jupiter and Venus represent the acquisition of property. And so if you see the ruler of the third ruler, triplicity ruler of the eighth with a benefic, then that could represent, you gaining something. And then the ninth house, the first triplicity ruler represents journeys and travels. The second triplicity ruler represents religion, faith, and ethics. And the third triplicity ruler represents science, divination, knowledge, astrology, premonitions, and dreams. And so this is very interesting because some people are into dream work and interpreting their dreams or other people's dreams. And so if you were to do that from an astrology perspective, such as maybe casting a horary chart for what a particular dream means, then you would be going to the ninth house, but you would also be going to the third triplicity rule of the ninth house for insight about what that dream means. And then the 10th house. The 10th house is the house that represents the mother, the career, and your reputation. The first triplicity ruler represents the mother, authority, honor, and rank. The second triplicity ruler represents your reputation, dignity, fame, and the type of action that you take in regards to furthering yourself or in regards to your career. And the third triplicity ruler represents the stability and endurance of one's fame. So some people get famous and they blow up really fast and then they fizzle out. And then you have some people that are famous for like 30 and 40 years. You have some people that stay within a profession and they do really well in it for a long period of time. That's all going to be dealing with the dignity and the strength of the third triplicity ruler. And then the 11th house, the first triplicity ruler represents hope, things given in trust, recognition from others. The second triplicity ruler represents our friendships, our companions, our allies, the people that patron us. And the third is going to represent the benefits or harm from friend or allies. And so this is very interesting because the 11th house is the house that represents people that advance us and push us forward. And so if you want to see whether or not you're going to have where your supporters are going to be for a certain topic, look at the second triplicity ruler of your second house, of the second triplicity ruler of the 11th house. My brain is like, I think I had too much caffeine today. I definitely had too much caffeine. That's why I'm talking so fast. I had like some coffee and then I had a headache. So I took this goodie and I can feel myself like just, and then I got moon in Aries. And so I'm like already just, so I hope I'm not going too fast and rushing through this as I have a tendency to do. But the last house is going to be the 12th house, which is the house of self-undoing. That's the title that it has. But the first duplicity rule is going to be more so talking about the enemies within your life, sorrow, sadness, disgrace, and fear. And then the second triplicity rule is going to show imprisonment, laborers. And then the third triplicity ruler is going to be representing animals larger than a goat. And um, that's important because the 12th house represents large animals. And so if you came to someone and said, hey, I lost my horse, where is it? Well, we will go to the 12th house and we will look at the third triplicity ruler of the 12th house because that is the part that represents animals larger than a goat. And again, the reason I think that this is so dope is because from a regular astrology mind, you wouldn't think to go to the 12th house to look for, a horse or an ox or, something like that. And if you did go to the 12th house, you would, in my brain, I have so many, like I understand that the 12th house is a malevolent house most times, but if I see a benefic planet in the 12th house, it's going to help me to be able to understand that, hey, that benefic planet may be speaking to this person, may work. I don't know if you guys hear that. It is thundering like crazy out here. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but it's thundering like crazy, which is fine because I'm about to wrap up this video. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't want this video to be too long. I wanted it to be short and sweet, and I wanted to basically, in a very direct way, introduce triplicity rulers and how they are used and how they can be used. And if you use them correctly, you can certainly gain much more precise information in reference to your chart. So if you found this video informative, please like this video. If you would like to gain more information or insight about your own chart, just shoot me an email. I'll have it in my description box below. And as always, comment your experiences down below. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe because I got to get my subscribers up. I'm trying to be more consistent with this uploading, but with me being at school, sometimes I just get overwhelmed. And there we go.